It's a novel called Matches. It was published by Little Brown in 2005. And so in this situation, in the book, there's a guy, it's based on my experiences. I served in the Israeli army during the war in Lebanon. So it's based on that. You rumble past the orchards and towns and pull up to wherever the designator's house happens to stand. Some suburb or hamlet, or even on the edge of the city itself, the refugee camp of Khan Yunis, which is really a small surrealistic slum with its own bizarre center. And here and there, even ringed by expensive villas and suburbs. And already other units, troops, are there before you at work. Engineering corpsmen, rigging explosive or manning a big tractor that rips out the house chunk by chunk, while the family stands by, wailing, pleading, shocked. Perhaps they had some direct hand in their sons or fathers or daughters or nephews' decision to throw a hand grenade into a schoolhouse filled with Jewish children. Or perhaps they aided and abetted the plan to enter shooting into an Israeli clothing shop, or helped to set off an explosive in a crowded civilian or Israeli bus. But whether yes or no, they were related by blood to killers who had either died in the attempt or vanished from sight. And so whether they were complicitous or innocent, still their house goes down. All the same, down it goes. And there you are, hopping to the ground from the Jeep, finding a spot to take up your post and guard the perimeter, have yourself a smoke. I don't know why this house. Until this house, I had never intended to turn my whole world upside down with Maya. Why this house? Maybe it was one house too many. Maybe it made me hate all houses for once and all. Down here, I had torn down more than a few houses. And they, Maya and Dotan, with their big, comfortable house-like apartments, privately owned in Jerusalem, had the closest to a house, a home, that any of us at that time in our circle of bohemians possessed. Though all was not well in their little paradise of a house. Yes, here and there were clues left about, like that yellow flower box in their bedroom window, fronting on the street, the one in which no flowers grew, containing withered, dead stems. And I, for one, lived alone in a small studio in Nachlaot, a place with a big veranda where I sat outside on a mangled sofa covered with old rugs. It wasn't so bad, but I was lonely. My neighbor, a dark-skinned old Kurdistani woman with a head bound by rags and a blood-stained apron, who used to accidentally set herself on fire at her cheap stove, would drop by with food, chicken and cakes and dried apricots that she herself had left out in the sun to bake dry, and hammered with her own two hands into sheetroll. Several times, though, I put out the flames in her dress and took her to the hospital, and that depressed the hell out of me. She was always all right, just a little singed. This was home to me, grim enough, and she the closest to family that I had, and we didn't even know each other's names or even speak. She knew no Hebrew, only Kurdistani. I felt sorry for myself and stayed away as much as possible and spent a lot of time with Maya and Dotan over at their house. Was there up in their house all the time. So were many others. Ora and Moshe, Shirley, Barry, Edna, Carl, Danny, Ami, Evie, Laura, Bill, Uri. The whole ever-widening circle, rotating through on a daily basis, in and out, artists, writers, dancers, puppeteers, actors, Drinking, talking, smoking, stoned, leaving, coming, all making plans, endless plans to be famous, rich, popular, sought after, envied. We debated the state of the nation, the constant warfare in the north and now in the territories, the Israeli arts establishment, our next program. Art exhibits, poem, dance, story, play. I would come up the streets in my shabby old raincoat, whistling in a drizzle, a bottle in my pocket, pack of cigarettes in the other, some book tucked into my waist to keep it dry. I'd glance up at their bedroom window, which fronted on the street. There was that yellow flower box with nothing in it, and a cold blue window mirroring the sky. Up there at Maya's, seated or on our feet, wrapped in clouds of smoke, laughing, intense, brooding, we postured against the delicious backdrop of our own certain imminent fame. Already the newspapers wrote about us, and it was just a matter of time before we exploded onto the international arts scene. The apartment was the hub of our energies. Dotan and Maya had a fine sense of our importance. They encouraged us to be there, to interact. It was a good place to feel special. I avoided Maya like the plague, though, always sat farthest away from her, at a remove. Told myself that secretly I didn't like her. She was phony, I told myself. Now when I saw her in those scuffed high heels, I hated them. Yes, that's what I told myself. She's a phony. It felt better to think so. Dotan was my best friend, I told myself. He was the real goods, a real artist. But the Northern War grew worse. The territories heated up. We were all called up. And I was in that strange, lonely place that I called home with the Kurdistani woman shuffling back and forth just outside my window, and she was humming a song. I was packing my bag, readying to go to my possible doom. There were no going away parties. We men just went. We never knew where to next. If there was a woman, she helped us pack. If not, we packed alone. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the clock. When it was time I rose, I left, bag in hand. I walked, and then I rode in a public bus to the rendezvous place. A chartered bus waited. The others of my unit were there. In silence, we learned that we were going to Gaza. We didn't know what to expect there. We'd never been. Mine was a unit normally assigned to combat duties in Lebanon. We weren't even serving in our own command. Back and forth I went from the Gaza Strip to Maya's house. He was now often up in the north with his unit in the communications truck under Syrian bombardment, which was constant. There were always, though, others around in Jerusalem during my leaves. I sat in the corner in uniform, smoking, not saying much. Sometimes someone asked what it was like down there in Gaza, and I shrugged, tapped an ash into an ashtray and said, shithole. I now often noticed Maya staring at me. Many told me how fortunate I was to be avoiding Lebanon, and I smiled and agreed. Inside I felt something taking hold, shooting down diseased roots, but couldn't say what this cancerous feeling, infection, boded or signified. It was as if the melancholy Gazan hues of my insides, my frequent mud browns, piss yellows, grays of mood, my secret depressions, black fears, a nagging sense of despair, all were reflected in the Gazan landscape, its very skies and streets, a private, morbid condition, peoples with faces of infinite hatred, the teeming masses of outraged and resentful inhabitants, their interminable blames and stares. I hid the symptoms from others, even from myself, smoked and drank with a gallant sneer. One time I came there and only Ora and Moshe were around. Ora said, let's go dancing. And we all went out together, me still in uniform, to that cafe on Agrippa Street, and ate steaks with chips and danced and sat around drinking brandy and arak. Word spread and others of our clique joined us there. Soon it was a whole scene. Funny how we always found each other in these places, always some party going on. I I remember a blur of faces, gray and pink and smudged, dark and white, and loud voices and lots of jostling and smoke. A lovely, if temporary, antidote to Gaza. And I was huddled within myself smoking, my face lowered, chin ducked into my collar. Then I felt Maya's eyes on me, looked up, and suddenly in front of everyone, before everyone, she reached across the table, stroked my cheek, and said, "Darling one." You could have heard my heartbeat thudding, framed and solitary, in that room. The way it fell silent in Gaza when our patrols moved through a crowded, narrow street. And then the noise all started up again. The cacophonous dancing, clamor of our usual masked and clowning selves. That was all it was, a pause in the riotous circus. But it changed everything. Because next, I was down there again in Gaza at the house they were tearing apart chunk by chunk. Cinder blocks smashed and iron rods twisting like escaped snakes from its guts. The usual smattering of pot-bellied, pantsless kids were about, screaming and crying as if we Israelis were devils sent to abduct them down to hell. The mothers waited. The young daughters screamed accusatorily, and no men were around. No men were ever anywhere to be seen on such occasions. All fled into hiding to avoid arrest. After a while, you didn't hear the cries. I just kept telling myself, this is the price you pay for blowing us up. This is for the price. From then on, I carried a tiny, fragile bulge in my pocket, and always expected it to be shattered, but somehow it never was. It was a child's teacup, not even when crushed beneath my battle vest. How can it be, I wondered? Something so small to get by like that. It was always a spot of color in the drab environments, that bit of pink teacup against the khakis and olives and black, the muddy grays and beiges and whites, and the cold blue smears of the mirroring windows. And then one night, as I shrugged off my heavy gear and lowered it to the floor and laid down my rifle, I patted the pocket of my shirt and felt the broken teacup against my skin. Delicately, I lifted it out, shards of a shattered bird's egg from the nest, the pieces of the dollhouse cup. I examined each piece coldly, turning it this way and that. I assembled them in my palm and stared at the fragments. What the fuck, I thought. What the flaming fuck? I grimaced a lopsided, bitter grin and grunted to myself. Of course, I told myself. What do I think? What am I thinking? Maya. She was not in my head. This is, all of this is, the whole world is, but she is in my body, not my head. She is in my rib cage, my throat, my cock, my tongue, my fingers. She is definite, the only concrete happiness I will ever know, a house that cannot be torn down. I have to tell her what I have felt over this past year, what I have denied in myself, refused to countenance. She is married, for crying out loud. She's Dotan's wife. But what is that, a wife? A woman still. And in the cafe, her hand on my cheek. Everyone pretending not to see. Isn't it already too late?